What's the dumbest thing you've heard coworkers say? Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for the support. I live in New York and had to take a cab to a meeting in Jamaica, Queens. I expensed it, and someone from accounting rejected it because I didn't get prior approval to take a trip outside the US. I asked her if she truly thought I took a $40 cab ride to an island nation and made it back by another cab 2 hours later. Next story. It was General Election Day, UK. A bunch of them were sat around in the break room talking about how they had no idea what any party stood for or what the local candidate was in favor of. But you've got to vote, don't you? I was so close to screaming, "No, no you don't. You, specifically you, do not need to vote." The Tories got in that year, and I specifically blamed those 5 people. Next story. Do you have Google on your computer? This was asked so that he could have me Google this super offensive book he'd written. Something with a title like, "What's wrong with you, difficult person?" Next story. I worked with a woman in her early 30s who regularly said incredibly stupid things. She was absolutely shocked to find out that you can get soup in cans. None of us could figure out how someone can be this old and not be aware of cans of soup. She was very concerned about how badly we would be affected if there was a tsunami on the nearby lake. Next story. I was new to the location, and we were preparing to reopen the location for the season. I'm just moving around cleaning things, and this guy walks in who had worked there previous year and was back for the year. We talk for a few minutes, and then he points to this large ceramic cactus and tells me, "There's a spider who lives on the cactus. Her name is Esmeralda, and she's the location mascot." We wrap up our conversation, and I go to tell this to my manager, and he reacted with confusion, disbelief, and annoyance. 10 minutes later, I was helping him throw the cactus in the dumpster. Next story. There was an obvious issue with my company's server. I contacted IT, wanting to confirm. IT says it is probably my home internet provider. I tell them it's working fine, I can access everything else but my work links, software, and that my husband is also not having any issues. She states, "It is possible to have an outage in one room of your home and not the other." I just sat there Googling job openings. Next story. 2 tales from corporate America. Coworker 1, upon hearing some mention of Scandinavia, "Oh, that's where Javier is from." Javier was in fact from Venezuela. Nice try though. Coworker 2, "What's your first language?" Me, "English?" Coworker 2, "No, I mean like your main language." Me, "English." Coworker 2, "No, but like your," now speaking very slowly, "mother tongue?" Me, "Still English." Coworker 2, "No, I mean, your English is really good, but what language did your family speak at home growing up?" Me, "It may come as a surprise, but in England, it's pretty common to speak English." I feel mean because she is a sweetheart and was absolutely mortified once it finally dawned on her, but dang. Next story. That subject is my daily dinner entertainment. I work in a hospital. Here is possibly my favorite. Coworker needs to place ID band on patient. She asks patient, "What are you having done today?" Not her business. Patient stutters, "Having something removed from my cervix." Worker, "Yeah, but what side?" Patient, I guess I don't know." Me, "That worker guessed, and put it on the right arm." And later I explained for the 100th time, it always goes on the left, unless they are having surgery on the left arm, hand, shoulder. I was too frustrated to explain to her what and where a cervix is. Next story. In a manufacturing plant that was not in a cattle ranching region in the US, a newly hired quality manager that none in our office had personally met came busting through the door of a small, typically quiet, engineering office dressed up in a cowboy outfit. Boots, tight jeans, button-up long-sleeved shirt with bolo tie, big hat, big shiny belt buckle, and a handlebar mustache to top it off. This guy was like a caricature of a middle-aged, overweight cowboy. After taking a couple steps through the door, he looks at the 3 of us in the office and asks loudly in a heavy Texan drawl, "How do you get those pictures off of there?" I looked up with an accentuated hard blink, and after about 10 seconds pause trying to render what this guy was asking about, or if I misunderstood him due to the accent, I asked, "What?" The guy repeats what he said the first time. Not helpful. The 2 others in the office and I exchanged glances, and then tried to figure out what he was asking about for the next couple of minutes. The only meaningful additional info we got from him was that he was looking for pictures from the machine's camera. We thought he was asking about something pertinent to engineering photos, or engineered drawing, or maybe an onboard camera for one of the machines in the plant. He finally gets frustrated and leaves when we can't give him the answer he's looking for. It turns out he was looking for footage from a security camera because he wanted to track down a product defect by watching security footage from a certain date, time. Next story. My intern went on spring break, and when she returned, I asked her how it went. She said, "It sucked. We drove all the way to Panama, and when we got there, we got into a huge fight with our other friends, so we drove back the next day." I asked, "You drove back from Panama? The country?" She replies, "Yes. We live in Chicago, by the way." I ask, "So you drove all the way south, through all of Mexico to reach Panama, and then you drove back the next day?" She insisted, but I'm pretty sure she went to Panama City, Florida. Next story. You probably use a debit card too. I cash my check at the bank so I have lunch money for the week because I can't use an ATM machine. A 55-year-old woman who worked in admin at an accounting office. Next story. Wouldn't it be sick if Halloween was on Friday the 13th one year? A failed cosmetologist turned server said this. "I thought the company was cool if we used marijuana in the office." "No, we said we understand if people want to be recreational with it outside of work. That's fine. Not to hide under their desk and use marijuana." Grab your mess, go home. A massive call center employee who misinterpreted a company announcement and their manager. Next story, work-related. That she's going to keep tallying things on a piece of paper every day and count them up at the end of the month every month, instead of using the spreadsheet that does it automatically, because computers make mistakes. Not work-related. That people don't understand that having cats is harder than having kids, because when a cat is sick, it can't just tell you what's wrong with it, so you worry more than you do with children. Next story. I was talking to a coworker about ourselves, and I mentioned my brother is 12 years older than me, and she dramatically asked, "Oh my God, why is he so much older than you?" I was like, what? And there was another coworker near us who has no filter and said that was the stupidest question I ever heard. Next story. I am looking to buy a house, and just like everywhere in the world, it's near impossible. I got some advice from a coworker. His advice was to look at houses online that were on the market for a couple of months, and then underbid on those. This man bought his house 20+ years ago when that was possible. I tried to explain that in today's market that there are firstly no houses on the market for more than a month, and underbidding is not possible anymore. He had a tough time understanding that. Next story. We were watching the video where the robot went nuts. Russian coworker says, "That happened in Russia." And I said, "Then why are the guys Asian?" He says, "There are Asian guys in Russia too, you know." Me, staring at the Chinese symbols on the screen. Next story. On a hospital ward where I was working. Flip, everyone's spiking temperatures today. I don't know what's going on. Quickly followed by, "Does anyone else think it's absolutely boiling in here?" It was height of summer, no aircon. Next story. C equals coworker. M equals me. C, my daughter has become a Presbyterian. M, that's interesting. Are you okay with it? C, I'm fine. But when she visits, she'll only eat fish. M, do you mean pescatarian? C, that's it. Next story. My thankfully former coworker was so nervous her first week on the job, her stomach reacted. She brought the bag of vomit to my office, hands it towards me and says, "What should I do with this?" Next story. With my group, what they say is not stupid initially. It's just that they repeat things, then rephrase it 9 times in slightly different ways, thinking they are adding to the conversation. Meeting person 1. I think we should write new web page. Immediately after. Person 2. An additional web page is a good idea I just thought of. Person 3. I was thinking that we expand out website by adding a new page. Honest to God, this is a loud woman across from me shouting into her microphone that has restated the phrase, "We need to tell them what to do afterward," like 10 different ways. I hate Zoom. I miss sending these idiots to conference rooms. Next story. My coworker called corporate to demand payment of her student loans from years before because she thought tuition reimbursement kicked it when you got a job after college. I really couldn't fathom that someone thought that, then spent time on the phone corporate, and further complained to us she was so frustrated she didn't get TITS reimbursement. I kept my mouth shut during and after this experience and tried to control my expression. Next story. I live in the US. My 50-year-old coworker, in a group of other mixed-race coworkers, was talking about something, and she said, "There were actually more white slaves in the US during the Civil War than black slaves." I just stared at her in disbelief. No one said a thing until someone changed the subject completely. Next story. A colleague told us every day about the 5 chickens she had in her garden. She wanted to have little chicklets, but it didn't work. The hens were sitting on the eggs for ages, but nothing happened. So I had the idea that her cock might be lazy. She explained that she didn't have a cock due to the noise. Well, next story. It was when the chair of the board of a nonprofit that I volunteered for said, "We're a one-income household." The one income was from the salary and dividends of her husband, who was the president and second largest shareholder of a public company that employed 2,400 people. Next story. A coworker did not believe that Oregon was a real place because she had never heard of it before. We were talking about where several of us in the office had grown up, and the guy who was from Oregon could not convince her otherwise. Next story. I have posted this before in other groups, so don't jump me if it sounds familiar. I'm American. I told a coworker I was going to London, and she asked me what language they spoke there. French? Next story. When asked why she didn't attend the meeting, didn't Outlook remind you of the Teams call and let you know when said Teams call started? Oh, I don't pay attention to those. Next story. Cut an onion in half, put it on the bedside table, and it will soak up the toxins. Said to another coworker when their daughter was sick. Person in her 30s. Next story. Oppenheimer was nominated 3 times for the Nobel Prize in Physics, but it was never the Peace Prize, and he never won it. Ironically, the Nobel Prizes, including the Peace Prize, were started by Alfred Nobel, a Swedish industrialist and armaments producer. Many of the people on the Manhattan Project won Nobel Prizes before or after the war. And I do remember a rumor, pre-meme, fake news, when I was younger, that the inventor of the nuclear bomb had won a Peace Prize. So I kinda get the confusion on that one. But if they watch the movie, you'd think they would have a better idea. Next story. Employee in question has a company-issued Windows tablet computer connected to a hub, which in turn is connected to monitor, keyboard, etc. On the morning in question, the employee couldn't get the tablet to turn on because they never turn it off properly. Complains that they have a Teams meeting in a few minutes and says, can they just do it on the monitor without the tablet? I told them that the monitor won't work without the tablet. It's like having a telly without a Skybox, as an example off the top of my head. And the reply, but I don't have Sky. Next story. I have a few, what's the difference between still and sparkling water? Does it come from different volcanoes? Where's Paraguay? The answer of next to Argentina didn't work 4 times. In the end, the explanation was, go all the way to the bottom of Africa, get in a boat, and go right till you get to land. Had to show on a map. Struggled to understand diagonal. Still isn't sure. Next story. I work for an upscale cruise line. Here are a couple I have shook my head at. When asking about transfers to and from the ship and airport, yeah, they go both ways. Like my mom. Discussing meal options. We have both specialty and casualty dining available. Next story. On an all-teams chat with top leadership after someone brought up cost of living increases. It's ridiculous. I can't even afford McDonald's for my kids anymore. What is the dumbest thing you explain to a coworker or classmate? Next story. Explaining that miles per hour literally means miles per hour. We had to make a site visit, saw a sign that said 65 miles to the site, and I said something like, cool, 1 hour left. Coworker asked how I knew that. I said, well, seeing as we're traveling at 65 miles per hour, with 65 miles left in our trip, that's about an hour, give or take. She said, that's not how that works. How fast you're going doesn't have anything to do with the time it takes to get there. Next story. I once had a girl in her early 20s, I think she was 23, ask me to reduce her schedule by 1 day, down from 5 to 4. No problem, we can accommodate that. About a month later, she complained to me that her last few checks had been about 20% smaller. I had to explain to her that working less hours meant getting paid for less hours. Next story. I don't know any other way to explain this. Him. What time is it? Me. 8:45. Him. You're messing with me. Me. What? Him. I know that there's not 100 minutes in an hour. I had to explain fractions, time, and that it's not the same time everywhere. He was at the time 28 years old. Next story. I'm a teacher who has taught everything from middle school up through college, and it would absolutely shock you how many people do not know even simple things. I've had multiple students who have sworn up and down that chicken is a vegetable or that Canada is a state. I've had college kids who marvel at the idea of scarcity. They just think products are made at the stores they are sold at. But by far the dumbest was a high school girl who wrote a report on the space race and actually thought it was an actual race, as in the US and the Soviet Union just built rockets and they raced to the moon to see who had the fastest rocket. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Next story. I had to take earth science in college to uplift a credit requirement. One class we literally had a globe and we were, with the person next to us, supposed to find the longitude and latitude of various cities, one of which was Cape Town, South Africa. My partner, dead serious, looked at me and said, "Ugh, I can never remember which one Africa is. Not South Africa, just Africa the continent. Like, there's only 7 of these things, you should be able to figure this out." Next story. Who Hitler was. A woman I managed at a restaurant would pitch a fit when I asked her to do little parts of her job. I said, "You act like I'm Hitler or something." And she said, "Who? Adolf Hitler? I don't know him." Next story. I have a couple actually. First one. Not a coworker but a customer. I had to explain that I cannot sell something that my store does not carry. And my store did not carry said item because the item is a product of a direct competitor. They just can't grasp the idea that, yes, this product does exist for people to buy. However, my company does not sell it because it's the direct competitor's very own product. This other one is a coworker. I was calling work to talk to our personnel lady, asked if she was in, and they said they didn't know. I had to ask if they could check because I needed to talk to her. They asked and come back saying, "Yeah, she's here." So I had to ask if I could talk to her. They say yes, but don't do anything. So I explained to them that for me to talk to her, I need her on the phone. And they either need to get her over to the phone or they needed to transfer the call to her office. I hate calling work. Next story. Brazil is not in Africa. There are more than 250 million people on the planet. Sexism does not mean absolutely. The first atomic bomb wasn't dropped in 1750. World War II wasn't in the 21st century. Next story. I had a coworker who worked in payroll with me. Payroll people generally understand how payroll deductions work. He thought investing in a 401k was the worst thing ever and got super mad that the company was investing like 2% of his check. With the company match, he basically gained money despite the deduction, but somehow thought he was being robbed. I really tried to explain how 401ks work to him, even showed him some math on how the deduction worked and how little his check actually changed, not even including the free company match. He just got angrier. Next story. I worked at a hospital and they hired a relative of a higher up to answer the phone and act as unit secretary. The guy was very likable, but super spacey. We had to practice with him answering the phone and saying, "Stress care unit, blank speaking." We'd go over it and call in on another line. Every time he'd pick it up and say, "Hello?" It was hilarious and unbelievable. Next story. Super bright headlights blind people, which means they can't see, which means they're dangerous because they blind oncoming traffic. Also, it's like walking up to someone and shining a super bright flashlight in your face. You wouldn't do that, so why would you do it with your car? Some people don't seem to get it. Next story. That it is indeed impossible to step out on a cloud from an airplane. My coworker, 35 years old, had reasoned that clouds had to be solid, otherwise turbulence going through clouds wouldn't be a thing. I was flabbergasted for days. Next story. I had a coworker who said she went to college in Mexico and everyone spoke English. She went to school in New Mexico. She did not know that it was part of the United States. Next story. My first job ever was at a deli called Schlotsky's. I was around 16 years old. I think she was the dumbest lady I've ever met. Her. How do I warm this up? A cinnamon roll. Me. It's already been cooked, so just warm it in the microwave. Her. What's a microwave? Me. It's this. Just put it in and hit 45 seconds. Her. I don't know how. I also had to explain to her how tattoos work. Her. I like your tattoo. Me. Thanks. Her. So what do you do when you shower? Me. Just be careful and clean it really good. Her. But don't you take it off? Me. They don't come off? Her. But then how does it stay there? My manager also had to explain being fired to her. This was her interaction with manager about being fired. Me. I'm sorry, name, but we're gonna have to let you go. Her. Okay, but when do I come in tomorrow? Me. You're not. You don't work here anymore, so you don't need to come in. That's what fired is. Oh, can I finish eating? Yeah, I guess. Also her interaction with my mother. What's on? I'm not sure. Looks at the same menu my mom is looking at. I see the same picture as you, but it doesn't say the ingredients. I don't know. But it looks like, never mind. Next story. That everyone uses the same measurements for time, and that a European tourist who spoke perfect English would know how long a half hour was. They did not, in fact, have different time in France. Next story. I worked in a 10-bed psychiatric facility, mainly for people with schizophrenia. I had to explain to a coworker multiple times that she couldn't just give one of our patients sleeping pills in the middle of the day because he was anxious and kept coming to her for reassurance. He was annoying her. She didn't know the difference between the anti-anxiety medications and the sleeping pills, and didn't see why it was problematic to be sedating a man for sleep in the middle of the day anyway. I explained to her that what she really needed to do was make him a cup of tea and sit down and talk to him about what was going on for him. Keep him company. Do her basic job. Working in mental health care can be terrifying, and not because of the patients. Next story. You cannot remove an Allen screw with an open-end wrench. You need an Allen key. Me, after watching a new coworker try and do so for 45 seconds or so. I sat in shock and nudged my other coworkers to see what was happening. We all just stood there in amazement. Next story. That you can double-click a desktop icon to open it. This woman graduated university in the 21st century while always right-clicking and selecting Open from the drop-down menu. Next story. I work with attorneys. I had to explain to one that his job title was of counsel, not of counsel. He was spelling it counsel in everything, and it made me briefly furious that he makes 20 times my salary per year. Next story. I once had to explain to a coworker that the sun does not orbit the earth. Their response was, "Well, we are all entitled to our beliefs. I don't work there anymore." Next story. Not exactly my classmate, but I had to explain to a guy in this school program I was in that Subway Surfers wasn't related to Subway the sandwich shop. By extension, I also had to explain how Subway the train and Subway the sandwich shop were different. Next story. On my first day of college, my history professor went over the syllabus. The girl next to me leaned over and asked me what the civil rights movement was. I had half a mind to give her a nonsense answer, but I didn't. Next story. I once had to tell a classmate that people still die in childbirth. He thought that it had been completely eradicated, a la smallpox. The next year, a different boy was going on a homophobic tirade in English class, yelling about how unnatural it was, and I was the one who told him that, yes, animals can be gay. It was 2013. He literally could have Googled it. This same boy had printed out pornography and brought it to English class when we were 11. Next story. How a ratcheting wrench works. He kept detaching the tool from the bolt, rotating it, putting it back on the bolt, and then turning it. He yelled at me I was just tightening and untightening it when I showed him how it worked. His mind was blown when I moved the tool away and the bolt was completely screwed in. Next story. Gravity is not a unique property of the Earth. But then there's the time I gave up attempting to explain a standard Windows file dialog to a coworker and made the trip into the office after hours, essentially to click OK because it was faster. Next story. Classmate tried to convince me sex was more simulating for women than men, because when you put your finger in your ear is more sensitive than your finger. Next story. That babies are not born from your asshole, but vagina. I kid you not. What was hilarious is that the coworker in question couldn't get pregnant. I got pulled by my manager, and she tried to scold me for calling that coworker stupid, but after I explained this, she was sat at the desk questioning her life choices. Next story. I work in IT. I had a coworker who had been in the industry at least 2 years longer than I have. I am a port security tech, meaning I basically just reset network ports for other techs replacing computers. I had reset a port for a tech, and a few minutes after finishing, he calls back. "Hey, it's still not working." I checked the connection port side and saw that it was disconnected. I let him know there was some kind of physical disconnection. There was a long pause, and he finally said, "Oh, should I reconnect the Ethernet cable now?" I asked him what he meant, and he said, "I tried to log in, but it said it wasn't connected to the internet." I said, with the flattest effect possible, "Yes, you need to plug in the Ethernet cord for the internet to work." You might think he was joking around, but he was incomprehensibly stupid. He was eventually fired because he was simply unable to complete trouble tickets on his own. Next story. Had a coworker get caught up in an MLM, and she didn't believe me that it was a pyramid scheme, so I had to show her the John Oliver segment that specifically named her MLM. Despite this, she continued with it, and shockingly made no money. Next story. I had a classmate in high school that thought Alaska was next to Hawaii because that's where it was on the map. Also, that same classmate thought north was up. Next story. Former coworker got upset with me that I'd send people emails instead of leaving voicemail when I couldn't reach them by phone. I tried to explain voicemail is the worst form of communication and literally everything else, even a pager, is superior. He insisted I had to leave a voicemail because that's what you do. So I guess what I explained to him is that it was not presently 2002 and people get email on their phones. Next story. I had a roommate once that pointed to a map of the world and was all like, "Man, do you think we'll ever know what's on the other side?" We were both in our late 20s and sober. Next story. It was late afternoon in Sumner, 1988, and was just standing in the car park between our building, looking up at the sky. Colleague walks past and asks, "What you doing?" "I'm looking at the rising moon," I answer. "Don't try to trick me. You can't see the moon and sun in the sky at the same time?" I try to explain. They even know I'm an amateur astronomer, but they won't listen and won't even look where I'm pointing. You could say I was forewarned about the sort of people who will drink their own piss to stave off a deadly virus. Next story. I was training a young reporter and discussing possible interview subjects. I raised the idea of interviewing a Defense Force medical officer. She looked me dead in the eye and asked what a Defense Force was. I then spent the next few minutes explaining the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Then, I kid you not, the concept of war and why these forces were needed. To reiterate, this was a recently graduated journalist, news reporter. I had to fire her not long afterwards for her lack of knowledge and productivity. Next story. Many years ago in high school, I was in AP Human Geography, and we were discussing climate change in the global south and the impacts it has on them, and this kid goes, "Couldn't we just stop global warming by putting AC outside?" Next story. Had to explain that the movie Titanic wasn't the actual event itself, but just a dramatic retelling. I was in my junior year when the 3D version came out, and our teacher asked if anyone had gone to see it. I had. And my classmate Brandy very seriously asked, "How did the cameraman and the sound guy survive the sinking and the footage wasn't damaged? And how is it such good quality?" So the teacher says, "It's a movie, Brandy." Brandy says, "I get that. It's like a documentary, right? Like they were there and they filmed all the stuff that was happening? But how did they get access to certain things? And how did it all survive until today?" Our teacher just couldn't and sat down very defeated. Brandy sat nearest me, so she looked at me so confused. So I said, "Brandy, the movie was made in 1997. Titanic really happened in 1912. Jack and Rose were played by actors. All the characters are played by actors. The people who made the movie built a smaller version of the ship as a movie set and used a really big swimming pool for the ocean." She seemed to understand after that. 2 years before in biology, we watched a documentary on Typhoid Mary that had actors dressing and speaking as if they were from that time period and period-specific sets. Brandy asked if the actors were the real people. Somehow, it was I that had to explain to her that it was just a movie. Next story. EST was Eastern Standard Time and not EST Limited Time. I honestly thought that she was joking. When she saw 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, she assumed that the event, or whatever, was going to start sometime around or close to 8 p.m. Next story. I once had to explain to a coworker, an engineer, how a lunar eclipse worked. He appeared to not know that the moon revolves around the Earth, so he couldn't comprehend how the Earth could get between the sun and the moon. No, he wasn't a flat earther. He'd just never thought about it before. Next story. Dumbest thing I explained to an instructor. I attended a military academy a lifetime ago, and while I finished high school taking differential equations, I took my math placements on day 6 of boot camp at 6 in the morning and was placed into Calc 2. So my Calc 2 teacher asked me to the board to solve 4x short problems, partial differential equations. He said to identify them as homogeneous or non-homogeneous, solve the homogeneous ones, and write unsolvable next to the non-homogeneous ones. I just solved all of them. He said I got it wrong. I said no, they may be non-homogeneous, but the solution is right there. I wouldn't back down. And while DES are sometimes hard to solve, Lord, I doubt I could do them nowadays, they are remarkably easy to prove correct. So I put the solution back in the original question. Bam, proved. What I failed to understand at the time was while I was academically correct, the best kind, militarily, I was being a dick to a superior officer. I marched lines that weekend, and over a decade later, I'm still mad about it. Next story. When I worked at Dunkin' Donuts, a new hire asked me what was the difference between the green iced tea and the black iced tea, because she couldn't tell them apart. Never mind the fact that they're labeled, but one of them is absolutely green. Next story. I had to explain to my coworker that New Mexico was in the US and not in Mexico. She was scared of traveling internationally, but wanted to go to the hot air balloon festival they have there. I'm not even kidding. She actually went last year and had a blast. Next story. I had an elderly boss text me and ask for my phone number so he could call me. I texted back my phone number because it would have taken more than 10 characters to explain that he already had my phone number. Next story. Not really an explanation, but during high school, I loved science. I would sit at the back of the class and answer questions the teacher would pose before they would even finish asking them. Me and my friend would bounce ideas, concepts, etc. back and forth. There was a kid that overheard me and my friend's conversation and would proudly scream the answers I said aloud and receive credit, earn admiration for a science class? Anyway, I let it continue for a while, got bored, and at one point the teacher asked, "How does one increase brain power?" I made a fake science-y sound theory explaining that, simple, just hold your breath for 30 minutes, your body will redirect all blood supply to your brain to keep you alive. In this process, your brain power will be boosted. Of course, even a child who pays attention would know it is simple, but he proudly shouted at the top of his lungs, "Hold your breath for 30 minutes. He was roasted by the entire class for several lessons in a row. He also stopped copying my answers after that. Next story. How tampons work. This guy in high school thought girls made up periods as a myth to avoid sex, and tampons were just Q-tips inside a plastic tube for convenience. Next story. When I was a senior in college, I had to explain to a friend who was majoring in international business what a tariff was. He was also a senior, but thankfully went to a different school than mine. Within 6 months of my explanation, he graduated. To this day, I can't fathom how he managed to pass like 80% of the curriculum without learning such a basic concept that should have kept popping up class after class. Heck, I wasn't even majoring in international business myself, and I knew what a freaking tariff was from the few basic economics courses my own degree included. Next story. Had to explain to a coworker why I'll never collect the $6,000 loan my credit card offers, while we both enjoyed our lunch break of our minimum wage job at a local supermarket. Next story. Not exactly explain, but more like point out. We were in a meeting and somehow started joking about how we need mithril for something to be strong and light enough. One of the managers didn't know mithril was a fictional metal, and so we all teased him about it, especially because that manager had a degree in metallurgy. Next story. That, when merging onto a road, it's on the merging car to find a space to come in. My coworker insisted that actually people, by law, must move over for the merging car. This person drives and is in their mid-20s. Next story. I had a coworker that thought you only have so much blood for your whole life. He thought if you lost blood, then you could never get that blood back. He said he thinks people that donate blood is the most brave people in the world because they are now going to live shorter lives. Next story. I had to explain to someone how to dip a spoon in food and put it on a tray to serve someone chow in Army basic training. He eventually got a mental evaluation and was deemed mentally handicapped and kicked out. His recruiter is a dick for sending him through. Next story. That squirrels don't come from acorns and that there are in fact still Jews in the world after the Holocaust. Same person, different days. Bless her heart. Next story. U.S. Navy ship. There are multiple versions of stop that can be ordered by the bridge. Stop, as in close the throttles and let the propellers drift. Like how just taking your foot off the gas doesn't mean the car stops moving. Stop, as in apply steam in the reverse direction to lock the propeller in place. Only used when there's something wrong with the engine. And stop, as in apply steam in the reverse direction to lock the ship mostly in place. Never quite 100%, since we were floating and currents exist, but pretty close. Each order had its own method of being transmitted from the bridge to the clowns running the turbines. One fine Navy day, the bridge rings up stop 1, aka take your foot off the gas. Bit odd, but whatever. We throttlemen close the throttles. Then the bridge phone talker pipes up, says that a stop was ordered. Yep, and we did so. We can hear talking on the other side of the phones. The officer of the deck gets on the phones. This is, at a minimum, a commissioned officer with a college degree and 4 years of service. He demands to know why the ship wasn't stopping. Well, sir, you ordered a stop 1. Did you mean a stop 3? No, he meant a stop 1. Well, stop 1 is stop applying steam to the engine, and we did so. If so, he demands, why isn't the ship stopping? This was an aircraft carrier. 100,000 tons of inertia doesn't drift to a stop like a Prius. There is a long beat before one of the throttlemen suggests, "Physics?" We got screamed at, until the navigator, a commissioned officer with over 20 years' experience, told the OOD that he was completely wrong and to stop yelling at us. Next story. Had to explain how we had to break up payments for a large installment to our accounting department. They called a meeting, and I had to stand in front of the entire department and explain. You pay 1/3 upfront for parts. Halfway through, you pay 1/3 for parts to finish the job. You pay the last 1/3 after the job passes inspection. It was a 4-hour meeting with me repeating this over and over and over. All of them kept asking the same questions. Why is it broke up into 1/3 payments? How do we know how much to pay? It took me less than 20 minutes to get approval from the company owner in Japan. That includes going through a translator. The company wonders why they can't make profits. No one can handle money or contracts. Next story. Repeatedly had to explain military time to adults because that's how the time clock worked. I used money to explain. There are 4 quarters in a dollar. A quarter is a fourth of a dollar. 0.25 is a quarter of an hour. Thus, 0.25 hour is 15 minutes. A quarter of an hour. Result equals blank stare. Also, high school graduate kept asking me what time it was. I replied, there are clocks on every wall. She explained that she only knows digital time and doesn't know time with hands. How does this happen? Next story. There was a girl in class once. Oh, Courtney, fake name. We got assigned to proofread each other's college essays for our English class. Basically, we had to write an application essay as part of the class. She wrote, I'm applying for collage. She then proceeded to mark every time I correctly wrote the words college, effect, and chose, and corrected them with the wrong thing. She also crossed off the ly on the end of my adverbs. But the truly stupidest thing happened in the same class. Senior year of high school, so 18 years old, and she asked me how to spell orange. So I told her. She then says, no, I mean the color, not the fruit. Next story. Had to explain to a female server in her 20s why announcing to the staff that her labias were killing her after a long shift wasn't okay. Girl had no clue what labia referred to, and the other servers thought it was funny to tell her this was a great way to let the team know she was tired. Once it sank in, she was pretty mortified. Next story, that there is a difference between phobia and fetish. She was making a disgusted face while saying she had a foot fetish. I thought I had politely asked if she meant phobia, but her glare told me otherwise. Next story, I have managed employees for 30 years. I have 1 million of them. But one of the tops that come to mind, explaining to someone that even if you come in late, you still have to leave on time. Next story, at a store we face the shelves by pulling the product forward to the edge. I told a new guy to face the shelves, and when I came back, he was just standing there looking at the shelves. Next story, in college, I had to explain to a male friend and classmate that women can't just hold their period like they can urine. There's no just hold it until you have time to run to the bathroom. He was 20 to 21 and had a mother and 2 sisters in his house, and had made it that long without realizing that 1, while most women have semi-regular cycles, that they have no control over when those cycles happen, and 2, when it starts, menstrual products have to be replaced as needed, which isn't always at the most convenient point in your day. I also had to use a kitchen sponge and a cup of water to show him why you couldn't just leave in a tampon to plug it up until you get to the bathroom. Sigh. His mother did him, and future women in his life, a disservice by not even teaching him the basics. Next story. One day, in 4th grade, I had an argument with nearly half my class about mixing primary colors. We all agreed yellow plus blue equals green. They believed that if you add more blue to green, it goes back to yellow. I have a vivid memory of yelling back and forth, arguing that you can't go back to yellow by adding more blue. The teacher was sadly away getting supplies, or at the front office or something. As I'm in my 30s thinking back on it, I realize it's possible they were pranking me. This possibility is too painful to consider, so I choose to live in a world where that handful of kids were mistaken and not malicious. Next story. I work at an order-filling warehouse. A coworker didn't like where she was posted and wanted to be reassigned to my job, which requires higher pick rates than what she's doing. She was purposely doing lousy, having low pick rates, hoping to be moved. I had to explain to her that if she wants to be moved to the same job I had, that she needed to prove herself and increase her pick rate. At the rate she was picking, the only place she'll be moved to is being out of a job. Next story. Had to explain to a 50-ish-year-old coworker that summer and winter don't happen because we're closer or farther from the sun. He didn't understand axial tilt or elliptical orbits. He was very suspicious when I told him that summer in Canada meant winter in Australia. The real kicker is that corporate eventually offered him an international sales position in Australia. Next story. That a resident and a citizen are not the same thing. Just because you're working and living in a country doesn't make you automatically a citizen. She was from the UK and convinced she's now a citizen of another country just by being there. Never applied for citizenship or anything, just there on a work visa. Next story. I carry a city bus. I had to explain to a passenger that a bus marked Washington Street will not take them to Washington, D.C. I had to explain to another passenger that buses and trains being public transportation did not mean that he could get a train schedule from a bus driver. Next story. To my ex, who actually wasn't stupid at all, he told me that the blood in our body was blue, and only when we cut ourselves and the blood hit the oxygen did it turn red. With a confused look, I said to him, "So you don't have oxygen in your body then?" There was then silence. Next story. Me. "Do you want a Fig Newton?" Hands it to her. CW. What flavor is what? Me. Fig. CW. What? Me. Fig. CW. I don't understand. Me. It's a Fig Newton. It's fig flavored. CW. What are you trying to tell me? She had no idea what a fig was or that you eat it. Next story. That calories are not an ingredient. I told him how many were in the beer he was drinking. He then looked on the side and said, "No, it says there's only grain, hops, yeast, and water. There's no calories at all." Next story. I once had to teach a guy how to use an iron, and I don't mean like, instruct a man in the proper way to remove wrinkles from a garment. I literally had to teach an adult how to hold an iron. Next story. I had a coworker, a history teacher, ask me why so many Indian women seem to grow moles in the middle of their foreheads. I thought she was punking me. Next story. Gathers a bunch of field techs after yet another incident involving mishandled stuff. Alright, listen up. When you are packing up after a job, I get everyone is tired and wants to go home, but you have to take the time to make sure everything is packed safe. We caught a box coming from your trailer where one bottle of sulfuric acid wasn't screw-on properly and leaked in the box. These are very dangerous chemicals, and one guy interrupts me and says, "Bah, they always exaggerate the dangers. Sulfuric acid isn't that dangerous." I feel my eye twitch. I put one finger up to say, "Wait 1 sec." I get the box contained the leaky acid bottle. A cardboard box whose bottom is charred black by the acid. Yes, I know, acid doesn't actually burn in the chemical sense, but the reaction between sulfuric acid and the cellulose of the cardboard is very similar to a heatless combustion. Shoving the box in the idiot's face. Not dangerous? Pulls back my sleeve. I have a chemical burn scar on my forearm. This happened when a few drops of sulfuric acid found their way in my lab coat during my degree. Next story. In order to get milk from a cow, the cow has to have given birth to a calf fairly recently, meaning the cow had to have gotten pregnant with a baby to produce the milk. We live in a rather rural farming community, for one, to the point where our county fair is the #1 summer attraction. For two, of the 5 to 10 people I told this to, a large majority had kids who were, at one point, breastfed. I brought this up. Didn't your wife breastfeed your kid? Did she have milk before having that kid? And none of them could connect the dots, even my female coworkers. Like, they thought that the cows just magically produced milk once they grew up. Next story. It is always fun getting in a discussion with a girl I went to school with that there wasn't a bridge or causeway to Hawaii. Her argument was, "How did all the cars and truck get there, Mr. Smarty Pants?" Next story. High school biology class. About halfway through the year. About 15 to 16 years old. Girl in class raised her hand and asked what H2O meant. The entire class all turned and looked at her in disbelief. Next story. How to issue an insurance policy to my coworker who has been in the same position as me for 2 more years than me. When he was on the web page that had the button that said issue. Next story. My landlord believes water flows uphill. I've explained to her on lots of occasions the physics behind water flowing downhill, but she just doesn't get it. Next story. Not a coworker nor a classmate, but a customer. I used to work at a printing copying shop. A couple came in, M and F. They wanted to print out wedding invitations, table name cards, etc. The guy had the wedding invitation made as an image. It had the invitation text and pink flowers around it, and he had put them in a Word document. I asked him about the paper he wanted it to be printed on. He said he wanted it to be on a thicker side and gray. Since this was just a printing shop and not some big fancy printing house, I informed him that we don't have white ink, and the gray paper will be visible through the pink flowers, therefore making the flowers a lot darker. But he was confident the flowers will look just fine. The conversation went something like this. Me: unfortunately, since the paper is gray, the pink flowers won't look the way they look in your Word file. They will be darker since we don't have white ink to print underneath them. Him: no, the flowers will look the same. I made sure they will. Me, a bit confused: I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean by that. Him: the file. I made it so the flowers would be pink. Me: well, yes, they will be pink, but much darker, and I was about to suggest a lighter paper, maybe with slight shine or sparkles, but got cut off. Him: I made it in PNG, and the white ornaments too. Me, looking at the Word file where the page has a white background, and with the invitation text, flowers, and apparently with white ornaments too. I'm sorry, there are white details on a white background there? Him: yes. I clicked on one of the images, made it so that it moves freely, and dragged it around, and yes, there were white swirls. Me: I'm sorry, but those details won't be visible. We don't have white ink, and they won't be on the printout. Him: no, you don't understand. They will print. I made sure to make the file the way it would print out. Me, getting a bit irritated: but as I said, we don't have white ink. We can't print it to have white ink. We can't print it. Him, starting to sound very sure of himself: no, it will. Me, was wondering just how dense this man was. No, it won't, sir. We don't have white ink. Meanwhile, the lady he came in with was starting to get visibly uncomfortable. She caught on to the issue pretty fast, and even tried to get the guy to stop arguing with me, but with no luck. Him, very sure of himself: no, it will. The file is made correctly. Me: listen, sir, it doesn't matter how you made the file. We don't have white ink. Him: no, you don't understand. Me: sir, I understand. I've been working here for nearly 5 years. I know these printers like the back of my hand. They won't print white color. The lady he came with: just print it on the darkest paper, please, so he sees it for himself. Me, smiling, because I love me some malicious compliance: of course. I took the darkest blue paper we had and printed the file on it. Of course, the pink flowers were just dark blobs, and there were no white swirls anywhere. I showed him the printout. Him, looking at it: him: fine. They ended up choosing a different, nearly white, but glittery paper to print the invitations on. But you know what else is funny? That was not all. We got to the next file: table name cards. They were in the same style as the invitations. When I opened that file, the guy turned to the lady and informed her, as if she hadn't just witnessed the whole white ink fiasco: the white won't show in these printouts. The lady facepalmed, and I had to suppress my laughter. Next story: that it was okay to admit to wearing some fake tan during winter if someone asked, even though it really isn't that person's business, and that it wasn't a big deal if they wanted to wear it and didn't want to say anything. However, telling people that they got the tan from a small, under-the-desk bar heater made them sound stupid. It was important not to lie over such a small, insignificant thing. Also, for the same person, had to explain that the primary language of folks from Mexico wasn't Latin, because Mexico is in Latin America. They were amazed by the Spanish skills of their Mexican boss when a colleague from the Madrid office was visiting. Next story: while working at Culver's, I had to explain to a cashier explaining to a customer that the difference between white meat and dark meat is not just the dark meat is darker. It was an incredible moment in my life. Bless her heart. She was very cute and nice and went to a different high school than I did. Next story: once had someone try to argue with me that Spain started WWI. Can't remember why they thought that. Also had a coworker try and tell me people don't need to brush their teeth. He said, you ever see mummies? They always have good teeth. Have to explain they hate different food with far less sugar in it. Next story: to my friend's 28-year-old girlfriend that states of matter aren't Oregon, California, and Michigan, but solid, liquid, and gas. Also, I have no idea why she decided those were states that matter. Next story: explaining that a brown spot on a banana is not equivalent to mold, toxic, and does not have to be thrown out. Still didn't believe me. I got free bananas every once in a while though. Next story: multiplication. My coworker at Subway was counting the chips on a rack, throwing them on the floor one by one. After explaining to her that was a health hazard, she stopped throwing the chip bags on the floor and counted them one at a time for several more minutes. She came to me and said there were 700 something. I told there was no way there were that many chips. I went to the rack and counted how deep each row of chips was, how many chips were on each row was, and multiplied it by how many rows there were. She couldn't accept that her count was off by hundreds, and kept telling me that it was impossible to estimate the number that way. I don't know which part was dumber, throwing food on the floor to count it, or not understanding multiplication. Next story. Something that I've explained multiple times to a particular person is that driving your personal vehicle would be a better, more enjoyable experience if there were better, more effective public transit. Because every bus full of people is dozens of cars that aren't in your way on the highway. Next story. How allergy shots work. I was explaining to one of my coworkers, we're both teachers, that my cat allergies were getting better because I had been doing allergy shots. She went off on me for being so cruel. She thought we were giving shots to our cat to make them stop making the allergen. Next story. I explained to my buddy in AP Lit that pre-adult isn't a word. She was thinking of young adult. We just graduated high school, so it wasn't too long ago, but man, I will never forget that. A few years earlier, I had to explain to her that the Boston Tea Party wasn't an actual party. Next story. I was a tour guide in a cave during summers home from college. I had a person ask how long it took us to make that cave, but the best was when we were several hundred feet into the cave and someone asked me, "Are we underground yet?" Next story. That new moon in the lunar cycle does not mean we magically get a brand new lump of rock orbiting our planet and the old one flies away and disintegrates or whatever. Next story. Here a list, because I tend to babble. Fast food restaurant. Deep fryers caught fire one day under my supervision. I had to close the line of cars down, 10 seconds. That's as long as my coworker needed to fill a pan of water and bring it out, fully intending to put the grease fire out with the water. Once I was done screaming like I was stuck on the roller coaster in the movie Final Destination, I covered the fryer with its metal lid and waited till it was out. The explanation was given after my panic attack and my hysterical crying were under control. When the gas stove next to the deep fryer caught on fire, a different day a year later, I had to explain to my manager and her manager that I in fact could not just continue to work around this issue, as I'd be expecting a painful death if I stuck around. She was adamant that I stayed and sold fryer at very least. I let loose with the fire extinguisher. When the fire didn't go out with that, I had to then explain that this was a weird behind fire and I was not gonna stick it out. She was baffled. Had put 2-week notice in. Manager wasn't happy. By the time we had a new kid working drive-through, it was one of my last days. Okay, figure I can teach him some good stuff while I can. I start with cashing out. There are a few options. Cash, card, Apple Pay, careless pay. My first step is to start with only the cash buttons. Homie turns to me with a $20 bill and a 3 times $1 bills on either hands and goes, Cue moments of intense thinking. I go, yeah? And he holds them out still on either hand and asks, how much is this? Yes, he immigrated to the country 8 years ago. He was in high school, senior year. I couldn't even hold my composure and I sort of snapped at him, but I was absolutely baffled. One of the many reasons I quit was the stress. I'm on job after that nonsense. A fellow sales associate answered a call from a man asking for one of the seasonal. Sweet, pretty girl. She'd helped a man in our store earlier and sold some pieces, jewelry. Thankfully, we just called her over and handed her the phone to let her deal with it, but he'd asked for her personal info, including her schedule, name, number, and her social media. Once he hung up, I made comment on how glad she was there to nip that in the bud. Husso, who answered, didn't know why I would say that. Both me and the victimized girl, now deadpanned and terrified that this difficult person is out in public as a member of society, had to explain why it is, in fact, very dangerous to give away information like this to a stranger. And we had to explain that anyone on earth can walk in, say, hey, I'm so-and-so's parent, family, SO, and I need their info, and how it's very much not okay to give out info. I even explained HIPAA and what that does in medical fields to try and level it out. Not convinced she got it down. Next story, why farmers exist. Honestly, I still believe that I was being trolled by this asshole. Then again, as I get older, my faith in humanity's intelligence lowers daily. So I was 18. It was my first job. I was working home health. My client sends me to Walmart. Their neighbor had asked my client for a ride, so my client asks me to take the neighbor. So, 3 of us load in my van, and off we go. On the ride to the store, the neighbor starts talking about veganism and why we all should consider going vegan. So she goes through the whole meat is murder thing, how milk and eggs are basically stealing from the animals. Then, out of left field comes this gem, and while we are at it, we need to shut down farms altogether. Farmers are exploiting and stealing labor from the enslaved animals. I ask her if we shut down the farms, where would we get our food from? Like, where would we even get the vegetables for a vegan diet from? Her response was basically, we would get it all from the stores. I let this sink in for a second, questioning if I actually heard what I thought I heard when my client looks at the neighbor and asks where she thinks the stores get their vegetables from. She starts acting like she is explaining 1 + 1 = 2 to a group of preschoolers. She slowly explained that stores get their vegetables from larger stores. I ask where she thinks those larger stores get everything from. Naturally, even larger stores. Okay, so those even larger stores? Where do their stuff come from? So we have heard the phrase, turtles all the way down. Well, apparently the answer is, stores all the way up. When we attempted to explain that isn't how it works, and all the food in the stores came from a farm, the neighbor got annoyed and told us we were compliant with animal abuse, and also wrong because she has never seen a chocolate tree. That was a whole other conversation I was not willing to have that day. Funny thing is, this isn't the first time I've had this happen. Had to explain to someone I know that the meat we buy in stores was alive at one point. They were complaining about how people still kill animals for food, and how those people should just buy their meat from stores so nothing had to die. Next story. There was this girl in my 10th grade honors history class. Remember the honors part. I had to explain to her why it was important to eat. I have a friend who likes her, and has told her multiple times that he likes her, getting less cryptic each time, eventually saying it outright. And still, she doesn't absolutely accept it. She's skinny, like really skinny. Remember the no eating part? And she's also vegetarian. She has said on multiple occasions, "Oh, I don't like healthy food." One time we were in class, and a few classmates and I were discussing hunting with the teacher. This difficult person couldn't grasp the concept of hunting deer, at one point saying, "Well, why don't you just buy it at the store?" She thinks we're the same height. Keep in mind, I was like 6 feet 1 inch, and she's 5 foot some. She would look up at me and swear we're the same size. I know one person taller than me, and according to this girl, he's average height. This guy was like 6 feet 4 inches and considered average. He's absolutely huge and still one of the biggest people I know. Now you'd think that she was just absolutely with us. I thought that too, but there is no possible way someone can keep this charade up for 3 goddamn years at that point. And somehow she was in all honors. I could barely pass one honors class, and I am leagues smarter than her. Granted, in my own way. Next story. I work in a bike shop and have been absolutely mind-blown by the things I've had to explain to people. Now I totally understand when people don't understand something conceptually. Maybe they just never learned. That's fine. But sometimes it seems like people are literally seeing a different reality than mine. I've had customers ask, "How could that chain possibly turn my wheel?" I politely show them that when you pedal, the chain pulls on the gear on the wheel, causing it to rotate. I don't understand. How could a person possibly not understand a very basic action and reaction like this? I've had people ask how brakes work. I try to politely explain and demonstrate that the caliper clamps down 2 soft rubber shoes on the sides of the rim, causing it to slow and then stop. I don't understand. It's truly terrifying to behold. Next story. How to pick up a piece of plastic off the floor. We were told to get everything off the floor at the end of the day to accommodate the carpet cleaners coming in that night. The guy I was working with had begun organizing his desk, then turned to me and asked, "I think that is everything, right?" All of our office chairs had those large, square, clear plastic carpet protectors, and his was still on the floor. Me, "You need to pick up your carpet protector." Him, looking blank. "No, I think that is everything." Me, "Roll my chair to the edge and lift the corner of mine." This, what your chair rolls on. Him, gets on the floor and starts pawing at the pattern in the carpet itself. Me, "Turn away and pretend this is a glitch in the matrix." Next story. I worked in HR a long time ago, and there was a new hire once who started on a Wednesday and could not understand why she didn't get a paycheck that same Friday. I tried every way I could think of to explain to her that no one in the store got paid for that Wednesday that day. Not even me, not the manager, no one, because payroll takes a week to process. I busted out a calendar, made visual aids, everything I could think of to try to get her to understand that everyone's pay was delayed by a week, not just hers because I had a personal vendetta against her, as she ultimately claimed. Even though this was our first time ever meeting, she got fired a few weeks later for theft.